Reading with your kids.
Hola, niho, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, bonimule wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful and historic neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show, and please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, wherever you find your podcasts. This episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Melusine, Birds of Many Feathers. Put down your iPads, young explorers. Have you ever wondered about the mysteries hidden in your own backyard? Join Melusine on an adventure to uncover a mysterious bird right in her backyard. Look, over there. What bird could that be? On every page, meet a diverse world filled with feathered friends and neighbors. This tale is perfect for young readers aged 5 to 10, and it's not your ordinary birding adventure, but a true appreciation of biodiversity. And you know what? The adventure doesn't stop there. Melusine, Bird of Many Feathers, is an ideal companion for the Great Backyard Bird Count, which starts February 16th to 19th, 2024. Participate in this exciting event with families from around the world and bring the joy of bird watching to your home. Grab your binoculars, everyone. Melusine, Birds of Many Feathers, is available now at your favorite bookstore and online. Autographed copies and exclusive offers are available at kiddlewingspublishing.com. Are you looking for a new book to add to your family library? Well, I have great news for you. Lynn Podrat, the award-winning author of Listen to Me, How My Down Syndrome Brother Saved My Life, has once again shared with us her family and a brand new book. It's called My Sister Wants an Elephant. Randy's sister wants a what? And his mom isn't flat out saying no? My Sister Wants an Elephant is a true story of two siblings who team up together to convince their mother to let them own a couple of wild animals as pets, and a mom who just might be persuaded. This book is full of humor and fun. It's a good lesson in not giving up on your dreams, no matter how truly wild they may be. Get your copy today. My Sister Wants an Elephant by Lynn Podrat. Join us right now from right outside the beautiful city of Toronto in Ontario, Canada. Our guest is here today to celebrate her debut children's book. Is called Pixie and the Bees. Please welcome to the show, Erica Richmond. Hey, Erica, how are you?
I'm great, Jed. How are you?
Wonderful. I always love having guests from Canada on because I have so many fond memories of trips to Canada, both as a kid and with my beautiful wife. It's such a lovely, welcoming country.
Oh, I'm glad that you've had that experience. Yeah. I love it here. And we have, from each coast, have so much to offer.
Yeah, really, really do. And Toronto and Ontario are especially beautiful in its diversity. Toronto is probably one of the most diverse cities that I've ever visited.
Yes, it really is. I spent a lot of time. I lived in the Toronto area and worked there for about 20 some years before moving to Peterborough. And yes, definitely incredibly diverse, which allows for such amazing conversations and stories with people, and not to mention amazing food.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about Pixie and the Bees.
Yes.
Tell us all about the story, please.
Okay, so Pixie and the Bees is ultimately just a story about a pixie who swallows a bunch of bees. And this swarm of angry bees live inside of her. And she goes to her friends who can't see anything wrong with her. She goes to her doctor who runs all these tests, and the doctor is like, there is nothing wrong with you. You're fine. Because the bees are so far inside of Pixie. But yet she's in this constant discomfort and feels so lonely, and doesn't know what to do. And she has to really trust herself and find ways to release some of these bees from her body, knowing that she has to count on herself in these moments.
It sounds like the bees are making Pixie feel the way a lot of kids feel when they're anxious.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And in fact, I wrote Pixie and the Bees after having had about a year of extreme anxiety symptoms, but not knowing what it was at the time. So I had been to my doctor numerous times. I had been feeling really uncomfortable and not sure what was going on, and eventually did receive an anxiety disorder diagnosis. But even still, I had a hard time explaining to people what was happening inside of me, because I was often met with, well, you look fine. It doesn't look like there's anything wrong with you. And so I sat outside on my back deck one day and wrote a story about a pixie who swallows all these bees, because I felt like I had bees buzzing through my body. And that's in fact how Pixie was born.
So this is something that I think parents have a great concern about their kids and anxiety. We hear that there are more and more kids dealing with issues of anxiety these days. And, my first instinct is to ask you, so what's it like when you feel anxious, when you're having an anxiety attack? And I'm not going to ask you, because you just said to us, I have a hard time describing that. I couldn't tell it to my doctors. But, what is there something, a way for you to help me and my limited intelligence to kind of wrap my head around what kind of what that experience feels like?
So, I mean, for me, my anxiety felt, in fact, like I had bees constantly buzzing through my body, in every limb of my body, in my chest, in my stomach. I just felt this vibration happening all the time. And I actually thought everyone felt that. I didn't know this was something unusual until a conversation with a friend of mine. And that's when I was like, oh, wow, like I thought everyone always felt like they had bees in their body. And so that to me was the best way to describe it, my own anxiety. Now, that said, since publishing the book and being able to have conversations with other people, what I've loved is that it opens up this conversation piece that they then share with me what their anxiety feels like. Because their anxiety might not feel like a swarm of angry bees inside of them, but instead someone said their anxiety felt like TV static. And it just opens up these conversations. And it's quite beautiful. It's like by sharing my story, I'm almost giving permission to other people, for other people to share what their anxiety felt like to them.
Now, when I hear the word anxiety, I'm thinking it's a worry, that I'm really worried about something and feel really anxious. Am I close, or am I completely off base?
No, yeah, close. I mean, the challenge with anxiety is that it's not always, you can't pinpoint what you're nervous about. It's not like I was, at the time I was like, to my doctor, who my doctor is actually was wonderful and actually saw me weekly for about a year, as we were investigating all of my symptoms. And she kept coming back to anxiety, and I kept pushing that diagnosis away. But because I said to her, I'm like, I'm fine. Like I'm okay. I don't think I'm that worried about anything. And it wasn't that. It was this, this state inside of me of just feeling this dread of what might happen. And so sometimes you can really, like, if you have a job interview coming up, yes, you might get anxious about that. That's a very specific thing. And sometimes it might just be you wake up with this feeling of anxiety all through your body, and you don't really know why. And so it's in those moments that it's really hard. It's hard to explain it to yourself, and then to explain it to other people who are, then like, well, what are you worried about? I'm like, I don't know. Or if you do tell them that you're worried about, that, going to a coffee shop, for example, might be a huge source of anxiety for someone, where someone else might not understand why that would create worry in anyone, because to them it's just an ordinary thing that they do.
Do we have any idea of, because there's certainly a lot of things in this world that can make us anxious, and if we watch the news, we can come away from a regular newscast with a dozen reasons to feel anxious, because the news is all about if it bleeds, it leads. So let's make everybody panicked. But is there anything that you've been able to identify that brought this anxiety on?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it was, past experiences. And so I was, I was being supported by not only my family doctor, but a counselor. I was doing, some intense breath work, saw an osteopath. And so it was through everyone that I was able, I still can't necessarily pinpoint the exact thing, but I can now, when I'm feeling anxious, what I love is that I can identify it as anxiety. Is that I can say, okay, yeah, it's the bees, it's anxiety. And I know that I have strategies in place that can help me feel better. And then that in itself is just, I'm not left thinking like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't understand what's happening inside of my body. I can pinpoint it, and it certainly makes a big difference in my day.
Well, I'm really thankful that you're willing to share about this, and I apologize for digging deep into your personal life, but I think it's important. I think it's helpful for parents who are listening, because, like I said, we hear more and more kids are dealing with anxiety, and of course there are lots of reasons for them to do that. I mean, just class about climate change can send a kid, into a deep state of panic and worry, and so I think hearing your story is going to help parents be less afraid to kind of talk to their kids about this, because it's like, okay, we don't know what's happening right now, but there are ways to help my kid. There are ways that my kid can help themselves.
Yeah. And I think it really just opens this conversation. It allows, the idea that, we can have a conversation about anxiety, and it's not necessarily that scary because it's a children's book. It's a book about a pixie with bees. And so it can start with something very, very typical for kids, in terms of a story. And then it can open up that conversation.
Yeah. One of the things I've shared here on the podcast, I do educational magic shows, around the country, and lots of young performers will come up to me and they'll say, well, I get on stage, I'm worried, I'm so anxious, I'm so nervous before I get on stage. It looks like you don't worry at all. And what's the secret? And for me, I explain to them that those butterflies, or those angry bees that you feel in your belly and that pulse is racing, I said, I feel those same things, but when I feel them, I tell myself, oh, I'm excited, because that's the exact same physiological response you get when you're excited. So for me, it's a little kind of brain game. But that's just something that I'm doing before I get on stage. And even if I'm doing 3 shows a day, it's for a little bit of time. It's not all day. I don't feel that way all day. So are there any strategies, mind kind of exercises that you do to help you get through those moments of stress and anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. The big thing that I do is I try to get outside, leave my body, go for a walk. The book has a picture of Pixie riding her bike, and for me, bike riding was a big thing. And not hardcore cycling, just, riding my bike around town, and just being out in the world. I find that makes a huge difference. And also just focusing on breath. I wouldn't say, maybe meditation. I'm not always great at turning the mind off, but at least it's sitting in stillness and trying to be really focused on the present. That can be really helpful for me as well.
Yeah. I'm wondering, these activities, getting outside, being mindful, breathing, controlling our breath, meditation, I'm hard with that. I'm trying really, really hard to get into a habit of doing yoga, and the exercises, the poses are great. It's just the whole, you're a tree and think and be quiet. That stuff just, it throws me up. But do you think that we can help our kids proactively before there's a problem by getting them in the habit of getting outside more on a regular basis, turning off the devices, getting on the bike, powering up the bike instead of powering up the phone, and getting out there and practicing mindfulness, those kind of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of that can help. I think and the other thing is that kids learn by what they see. So, I have 2 children, and so I want them to see me taking care of myself. And getting outside. And, obviously I talk about my anxiety. I've written a book about it, so it's out there. And so, being able to have that conversation with them to say, hey, I had a hard day. I'm feeling a bit anxious, so I'm going to go for a walk. So they see that that's how I take care of myself. And then, they know that that's okay, that they can also take care of themselves in those ways when those feelings come up. But yeah, I think I'm a huge fan of getting outside and moving your body in ways that are simple. They don't have to be a full day event. They can just be a walk around the block, or sit out in your backyard and check out what's happening in the trees.
Yeah. And, if Erica and her kids can get outside on a regular basis north of Toronto, I think those of us here in the States can, it is cold out in the wintertime, but it's not north of Toronto cold. So
we've had some pretty big ice storms lately and snow. So yeah, getting outside in the winter is a bit more of a production, I guess, but it's still very doable, and it feels even better, trust me, to get outside once you're out there.
Absolutely. Now, I understand that there's a sequel to Pixie and the Bees coming out in the not-too-distant future.
That's right. The next book is called Pixie and the Fox, and that will be released on April the 4th.
Awesome. And can we get a hint of what that's all about?
Yes. So in answer of the most common question I get, Pixie does not swallow a fox.
I was going to ask that question, but I thought, no, that just sounds too stupid even for me to ask.
Yeah, no, she doesn't swallow a fox. And I hadn't thought, I was like, oh, that would be a very interesting series. But no, so Pixie and the Fox is another book that really takes some big feelings and makes it a bit more digestible for kids. And in this one, she meets a fox who is quite charming and loves everything about Pixie and convinces her to fly away with him and enjoy, because he really loves her and he needs her in his life and loves everything about her. But then once there, he slowly takes away the things that make Pixie who she is, her laugh, her light, her sparkle, all of that. And then Pixie is left alone away from all of her friends and family, and has to remember who she is and how to come back to that person, that Pixie. Yeah.
I'm curious because these are, and you said it was difficult for you to deal with anxiety. It sounds like Pixie and the Fox might have come from a moment in your life then when there was somebody that was, I think I've heard the term psychic vampire, stealing all of your energy from you.
What's that term?
You're sharing a lot about yourself through your work. Where did you find the courage to do that?
Gosh. So I've always written as a way to process how I'm feeling. That's ever since I can remember as a small child, I took to paper to process my feelings. And so the idea of writing my feelings out and writing these big experiences was natural, but the idea of sharing it with other people is a bit, it's scary and vulnerable. And I used to do a lot of blog posting for a while. What I love about writing, and I see the Pixie series really as a series of memoirs, because they really are. I mean, Pixie and the Fox is actually, it's about multiple characters kind of smushed together into one. But that Pixie is me, and these are my experiences that I've had. So I was in some expressive arts classes at a college nearby, and we were challenged with writing a memoir as a fable. And I had never thought of doing that before. And once I did, it opened this whole world for me. And so that was how I learned about, writing a memoir this way. And I've fallen in love with it. And so I started writing these Pixie stories as a way of, it's a way for me to process my own experiences and my own feelings. And that's ultimately the first reason I write, is for myself and my very first audience. But then to be able to share it with other people in a way that is less intimidating than just the story of my experience. If I had just written about me and my anxiety, it would have been a very different, it would have been a different audience. Everything would have been different about it. And it might have been a bit more challenging, both for me to share it and then also for the person to read it.
Yeah. We talked a little bit earlier about Pixie and the Bees being a great way to start a conversation with our kids about anxiety and feelings and being able to share them. I'm thinking that both Pixie and the Bees and Pixie and the Fox might be a great way just to start a conversation with your kids about their using writing as a form of therapy, just giving them, letting them know that, hey, you can always sit down and write a story talking about your feelings. And you don't have to share it with anybody, but just writing it and reading it yourself can be very, very helpful and comforting.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's how both of my kids, we've used a lot of writing and art as ways of expressing what's happening. And sometimes they share with me and sometimes they don't, and that's okay. But it's really, I'm a huge believer of using any type of expressive arts, whether it's writing, whether it's drawing, singing. All of that is so key to our mental health and to expressing our emotions and process what's happening.
Yeah. There may be a parent out there that's listening to this and is either dealing with anxiety themselves or trying to help their kids deal with it. And we didn't say at any time today, didn't say, well, all you need to do is X, and like magic, everything goes away. And so they didn't hear that one simple answer. And so now it's coming to the end of the interview, and they didn't hear that answer, and they're frustrated, and they're anxious about being anxious or anxious about their kids. What hopeful message can you share with them?
My message is that this is the beginning of a conversation. This is the beginning of letting your child express how they are feeling. And that to me is, once I was able to share how I was feeling with someone who met me with empathy and understanding, that was huge. So if you can have that conversation with your child, that is incredible. And I think that is going to open up so much, because they'll also know that they can trust you with their stories. They can trust you with how they are feeling. And this is the beginning.
Yeah. We oftentimes will remind parents, I don't do it enough anymore, that we are our kids' first and most important teacher. I think we should also start coming to understand that we are our kids' first and most important healer as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Erica, where can we go to find out more about Pixie and the Bees and find out more about your journey?
You can find about both on my website, openskystories.com. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Open Sky Stories. And both books, Pixie and the Bees is currently available on Amazon and can be purchased through any bookstore. And Pixie and the Fox will also as of April 4th.
Wonderful. We've had a really wonderful time speaking to the author of Pixie and the Bees. Our guest has been Erica Richmond. Erica, thank you so much for being with us.
Good.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. To make sure you don't miss a moment of the show, please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Good Pods, Boomplay, Player FM, wherever you find your podcast. And please be sure to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can click on the Parents Click Here button at the top of the page, check out our blog, our certified great reads, and download our free online magazine. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our amazing guests. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Kyoko Ito, Nick Warner, Sydney Swan, Kayla Newland, Kristen Barrett, Hannah Rose. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. You are amazing. You are the most important person in your kid's life, and you make the world a better place every time you choose to read with your kid. I'll be looking for you in the next exciting episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.